Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Breaking 90 podcast. Jerrika, am your host today with my amazing co-host, Coach Kelly. And
Hi.
we are two of your coaches of the Breaking 90 Fitness. Thanks for listening. Hey, Kelly, how have you been?
I'm so excited to be here, Jerrika. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank
I have a
you.
funny story for you, actually. And this is
Take
a
it away.
different story than I was originally going to tell on here. But this just happened, so I have to tell.
Did you just get
So
brave?
something just happened before our podcast.
Okay.
So I always sip on bone broth as like an afternoon warm. For those that know me, I'm a constantly cold person. So anything tea, hot water, bone broth is right up my alley. So today I decided to try turmeric bone broth. And for those that use turmeric, know how yellow and how much it stains. And I don't use it a ton, so I wasn't really fully prepared for this. But I'm wearing my Breaking 90 hoodie for those that are just listening. And the hoodie has these white drawstrings coming from the hood. And as I was leaning over to sip my turmeric bone broth, my white drawstring dropped into it. And it's just officially bright yellow, like
Beautiful.
vibrant. And I don't think I'll ever get this stain out. So that's my story.
Thank you.
It's not originally what I was going to share, but I thought it was worth a share because I'm sure so many people can relate with turmeric.
Yeah, I bet you're going to get comments of people who are like, no, you just need to use this and it'll get it out.
Well, that's what I'm secretly hoping for because it's happened in the past and I've tried it all, like soaking in oxy and whatever, bleach. And so if anyone has any tips and listening, please reach out to me via Facebook and let me know.
That's too funny. Thank you. Okay, we're going to dive into today's topic, yes?
Absolutely.
Okay, so before I was a coach, was a client of Breaking 90 Fitness. And prior to that, I was just in the dark about what health and fitness really truly was. I had my own ideas of it. But what I wanted to talk about was all the times I've been wrong about health and fitness and been happy to be wrong. I think this is a really kind of cool approach to this. I know you guys have talked about myths in the past,
right?
Which is really, really wonderful because it makes this whole topic way more accessible for people to want to do things for themselves, to help themselves. But I think there's a big fear about being wrong in life in general. And it's always been one of my approaches to kind of be excited when I learn that I'm wrong, because I love to approach things with a discovery mindset. So, I don't ever have a problem admitting that I was wrong or that I made an assumption about something. And in those moments where I realize that I'm wrong, I have this quick little thought that's like, wow, you're about to learn something. And this is going to be a lot of fun. And hopefully this is a nice teacher in front of you too. And Alex and you have been two of the best teachers of my whole life. So I thought we could go through a list of times that I've been wrong about health and fitness, and you could elaborate on some of those points in case someone else out there was in the dark like I was as well.
This is super fun. I love that you're willing to be so vulnerable because you've learned so much from that experience. Okay, I'm excited to hear what you have, and I'll definitely add whatever I can.
Okay, so I chose 9 because it's my favorite number.
Okay.
And 10 is just too...
That's my favorite number too. So we're on a great start already.
Perfect. So I love this. Number 9 is carbs are the enemy. Do you know how happy I was to be wrong about this?
Carbs are the enemy. So how early on did you learn about carbs were not the enemy?
Not early on, like in my life. I learned probably on the first day of Breaking 90.
Okay, that's what I was hoping you were going to say. First day of Breaking 90. Was that what you heard?
Actually,
carbs are not the enemy.
I should probably give way more credit to Alex. Not even the first day. I think it was actually in the onboarding process of, awesome. Hey, you sound interested in this program. Let's talk more about what this might look like for you. When there was a no foods off limit conversation, I was like, wait, carbs aren't the enemy? You're not going to make me stop eating them? That was before my 90 days started.
That's awesome. I'm really glad to hear that. So for those that are listening, we know that there are 3 types of macronutrients. We have our proteins, our carbs, and our fats. And you often see these fad diets, we can call them, right, that'll eliminate an entire food group. One being carbs, probably being the most common food group that gets eliminated. And a big reason why I think that is, and why people think that they're the enemy, is because they're one of the macronutrients that causes us to retain the most amount of water. So when let's say, I haven't had carbs in a long time, and all of a sudden I'm gonna have a carb and I have a crazy spike on my scale. That's not, when I see that spike in my brain, right, I'm like, oh my goodness, carbs are the enemy. I just had that carb and now I gained so much weight on the scale. When in reality, it's likely just because we've retained water associated with having that carb associated with it. And that kind of creates that feeling or that fear instilled in a lot of people. Carbs are an amazing energy source, especially for everyone, of course. And we use them for just about every single thing that we do at day-to-day activities. So, and plus they're delicious, they're satisfying. And I think that's really important to note. When it's something that you enjoy, eliminating them completely is probably going to make you miserable. And that just creates that vicious cycle, right? Because if you're not doing something that you enjoy, if it's not sustainable, then we are going to end up binging on likely these carbs, which will in turn probably make us retain a lot more water. And then we're going to again go into that cycle of thinking they're the enemy because we had this crazy spike, or we feel bloated, or we feel lethargic.
Yeah, I love every way that you've touched on this, because, I would never think to myself, like, yeah, I'd love to eliminate dopamine from my brain. No one would consent to that, right? That's the pleasure experience. So to say, take carbs out completely, something that gives you a certain kind of pleasure, just makes no sense. When we talk about self-regulation, that makes a whole lot more sense. The other thing that you kind of touched on is our bodies know what to do with them. When you jump on a scale and you see that spike, it's not that they're the enemy and they're doing something bad to your body. Your body's doing something with them, and it might take a little bit longer to process them, or in a different kind of process. We don't have to be afraid of it.
Absolutely. Now there's different types of carbs, of course, and we want you to utilize carbs that will keep you energized for longer, those complex carbs. But even in Breaking 90, we told you that carbs are not the enemy and no foods are off limits, but we just learn how to eat things within portion control, right? So if you want, and I've talked about this probably at least 5 or 6 times in this podcast, I want my chocolate at night with my tea, and that is not the enemy, right? It's just making sure that we find ways to incorporate it into our plan, whatever that might be. Points if you're with Breaking 90, calories, or whatever the style that you use, and just taking into account that you're enjoying it, it's planned, and move on.
Yes, I love all of that. That's great. Are you good if I move to number 8 then?
Let's hear it.
Okay, and this is one that you continuously affirm for me, and I'm so grateful. Number 8 is walking isn't exercise. That was a myth I was so happy to be wrong about. When I did the intake and Alex asked, okay, so how much are you moving already? How much do you exercise? And I'm like, I don't exercise. I walk for 45 minutes a day. And he's like, those two things don't go together. Like you're exercising for 45 minutes a day. So can you elaborate on maybe even just the benefits of walking?
Absolutely. So I think that walking is the most underrated form of exercise. It's such a simple form to just get out and get moving. You don't need a lot of equipment, right? You just throw on your shoes and away you go. And what I love so much about walking is that, Kelly, you might go for 45 minutes because that's what you have, but I'm going to go for 10 minutes because that's what's available to me.
Yeah.
But if I want to challenge myself, I can, right? I can walk faster. I can walk slower. I can walk, I can play with a timer. I can walk on an incline if I have access to it. There's just so many amazing variables that can be played with and that can challenge you with just your running shoes and your body.
So cool. Oh my God, I love that. That's great.
That's awesome. Yeah, and you can it actually, you can build leg muscles, right? Like you can really challenge yourself. And I think people just see it as something I have to do because I walk around my house to do my chores, but utilize it and get outside if you can. It's an amazing form of exercise.
Oh, okay, you almost just touched on my number 7, but I have to pause and tell you how much I love your dog. For those of you who are only listening, Jared's dog is in the background playing with a toy. It's just so sweet.
I didn't even notice until you said that.
Okay. So number 7 is lifting weights is the only way to be or to get strong. That was something I was
Oh.
also very happy to be wrong about.
Absolutely. So we talk about progressive overload when we talk about getting stronger. And what that means basically is adding some form of challenge, and I'll explain that in a minute, each week or even every 2 weeks, making something harder, whatever you're doing, as time goes on. So we can even use walking, for example. Actually, I kind of just touched on it. So let's use, even swimming, like it could be anything, right? So if you're swimming at a normal, whatever, an easy pace is for you, you can make the next week either a quicker pace or a longer duration, right? So it's adding either time or different type of resistance or any type of variable and making it more challenging as the weeks go on. And that's how we build strength or whatever strength, cardio, endurance, in whatever exercise that may be. Let's use some squats as another example. Let's say Kelly doesn't have access to any weights at home, but she really wants to get better and stronger in her squats and make her legs stronger, right? So week 1, Kelly comes to me and says, Jerrika, I can do 8 reps and then that's it. I'm taking a break. And that's awesome, right? So I've got Kelly doing 8 reps, maybe 3 sets, and then we move on. On week 4 or even week 3, she might now be up to 12 reps for that 3 sets. So now she's increased her reps just on the squat. So therefore, Kelly is getting stronger in the squat. Now, if we've hit 12 and that's great, maybe instead of doing 3 sets, I want to increase it to 4. So you'll see there's different variables that I can play around with alone just with the body weight squat. I can add tempo. I can make her go really slow, or I can make her hold, and she will see challenges in the muscles of the legs. So again, we do not need necessarily weights at home. We might hit a point where we've reached, I can do 1,000,000 squats for X amount of sets, X amount of reps. And then I'll say, okay, Kelly, go buy those weights at Canadian Tire. But until then, there's so much to play with. And there's so many exercises that we can challenge you each week or every other week as time goes on.
Yeah. And you know what, even just as you're talking where like weights physically aren't necessary all the time, it really challenged me to see my physical environment differently, right? So I can squat in any room. I can lunge in almost any room. I can use my staircase to build leg muscles and arm muscles as well if I position myself right. So it made it actually more feasible to access health and fitness because I didn't have to buy a gym membership. I didn't have to buy any extras. Sometimes I didn't even need to put running shoes on, right? I don't recommend that because I love my orthotics now. But if you are starting out and you don't have disposable income to equip yourself, you can use body resistance. And I just thought that was fantastic.
Absolutely. I'd say walking is the most underrated form, and then body weight exercises. They are hard. They're really hard. It's a great form of exercise. Awesome.
Cool.
What's number 6? Is that where we're at?
Number 6 is that sacrifices have to be big.
Ooh, that's something that you thought of before coming into this. So give me an example.
Yeah, for one, time. I thought that the sacrifice for my time was going to have to be huge. And I, as an entrepreneur and young, so you're just starting to build the empire right now. I don't have time to work out for 2 hours a day. I don't have time to meal prep the entire week, some weeks, right? Like I thought the sacrifices had to be huge in order to, get to the goal that apparently everyone was trying to achieve.
Absolutely. And I think that also comes down to what your goal is. And even if your goal is some, even if it is a massive goal, I think you're right. It's starting with the small little changes goes a really long way. And everyone's starting from a different point here. So we can relate to this a little bit differently, but we'll start with time, like Kelly mentioned. And for a lot of the members joining us on our Breaking 90 team, or for those that are listening, if you're currently doing no exercise, all I would be asking is 5 to 10 minutes a day, right? Just something to get your body moving. And then if 5 to 10 minutes is what you're doing, then all I'm asking is 15 to 20 minutes per day. So Kelly might work from home at her desk, but between calls, she might have 10 minutes between calls. Well, then I'd be asking Kelly to get up and get moving for those 5-10 minute blocks rather than sitting down, if that's something that's possible. And if that wasn't, we would find blocks and ways to fit in that 5, 10, 15-minute blocks through the day so that she can maybe get moving and get up and at it. And I don't want us to think it's just about movement. We can think about this as nutrition as well, right? We do not need to we talked about this a little bit a tad at the beginning, massive sacrifices. We're not asking you don't have to give up an entire food group. You don't have to give up your favorite, you don't have to give up coffee, right? So just learning that things are, finding sustainable habits and understanding that, portion control could be way more and is way more powerful than removing something out of your life, right? So just, again, small little changes can add up as long as we're consistent. And that's one of our big things that we talk about at Breaking 90 Fitness is that consistency.
Yeah, I think can't even say in my younger years, maybe just a few years ago, I used to look at people who were super fit, super athletic, and try and convince myself that they must be miserable. They must be miserable because they had to make huge sacrifices to look like that. Right. And I don't know if it was like my rationale so that I wouldn't start. But I just thought the sacrifices had to be so big in terms of they must just work out 6 hours a day and eat what their trainer tells them to eat and not really get to enjoy life. And I was wonderfully wrong about that.
Yes. And I'm so glad you were. I'm a coach in real life as well, for those of people that are listening and didn't know that. So I coached here at a gym, and I had one of the members there come up and be like, how many days a week do you exercise? Or how many days a week do you? And I'm like, sometimes 3, sometimes 4. Like, I love my rest days. Right. So, and they were completely shocked because, again, it's that you have to make big sacrifices and work out every day, and the more is better attitude. And I am totally about recovery. So that was also nice little chat that I was able to have with someone.
Cool. I love that. Number 5. That it takes a long time to feel progress.
Ooh,
so it kind of, it was like a natural succession from what we were just talking about. And I remember thinking like, oh, if I start today, I won't see progress for like another year. So it was just another reason to start tomorrow instead. Right. And then I started with Breaking 90 with a food log, no less. Like no changes were even necessary. I just had to log my food. And because of that task, I tweaked things slightly, maybe added in another vegetable. And I was like, man, I feel more energized already. And it's like, I don't know if I was expecting like, oh, well, I won't see abs for a long time, or I won't see big muscle for a long time. So everything, progress isn't coming for a long, long time or far out. And it was like, I felt energized the next day, or I felt energized that afternoon.
See, that's awesome. I'm glad you brought that up because depends who you are, but progress is measured in so many different ways.
Yeah.
Right. For a lot of us, progress is typically aesthetic or visual. Like you said, a lot of people, when they think progress, are like, I want to see this definition in this muscle. But when in reality, step 1 would be probably, how are you feeling? Right. Like you mentioned, eating more vegetables to you correlated with feeling more energized. Pretty amazing. And that's progress. Progress can be, like you mentioned, taking pictures and seeing changes that way. Progress can be our sleep. That's a really big one, right?
Yeah.
If you're eating better and moving more, you're probably sleeping a lot better. So in the first, maybe even week, 2 weeks of this new routine, that's huge progress. And you haven't even thought about your physical body. You're just thinking about, like, you haven't even thought about your aesthetics. You're just purely thinking about the progress you made with sleep. And then that's a beautiful cycle. If you're sleeping better, you're probably working out harder. You're probably wanting to eat better, and it just continues on. But I'm glad you brought that up because progress can be measured in many different ways. And like you said, the day of, the week of, 2 weeks later, and you will start seeing those changes.
Yeah. And I think it also challenged me too, especially over time, because I've been obviously with Breaking 90 for a while. It really challenged me to like kind of go into those philosophical questions of like, what is time? If you don't see the quote unquote progress that you were hoping for a whole month, what is a month over the course of your life? right? Like really, how much time was that? You thought that was a long time, but it was 30 days of something consistent. That's fantastic. It's more of a defeatist perspective if you're saying it's going to take a long time to see progress, so I'm not going to start, right? I think we have other things to evaluate if that's our mindset, which is
Absolutely.
also, go
It
ahead.
makes me think of one of our clients, lost, let's say, 25 pounds in the year. And maybe their goal was 30. I think their goal was maybe 30 in the year. But then they took a step back and they're like, but I still lost 25
Yeah.
pounds in this year. And that year flew by. So, in the grand scheme of things, it's kind of reframing. Like you said, asking yourself, what is progress to me? What is time? What is time? I
Yeah.
like that you added that. That's a great way to put
Cool. Thank you.
it.
Okay. So number 4, 10,000 steps is the bar for movement. So truth be told, I first heard this, like the whole concept of 10,000 steps came because my mom was actually doing a lecture for a woman's health group called Living Fit from the Inside Out. It's a group for women who are 60 and over. And really and truly, it's a beautiful community that is just really encouraging movement and mobility. And so they encourage each other by doing walks together and activities. And so that was when I first heard 10,000. And then, of course, Fitbits came out and it's like, shoot for 10,000 steps a day. And I was like, oh, if I can't reach 10,000 steps a day, I'm not moving enough. And I was really happy to also be wrong about that.
I'm really glad you brought that one up, because this is one that kind of tickles me the wrong way sometimes,
Yeah.
because some of people, let's start off the hop with, who are cyclists, right? I always use the example of someone who's a cyclist. Someone who's cycling, geez, for 10, 20, 30, 3 hours a day, whatever it may be, they might show that they're getting 1,000 steps.
Did you go from minutes to hours?
Yeah, 10 minutes, sorry. 10, 20, 30 minutes, all the way to 3 hours. They could be on their bike for however long they want to be, but it might not show any steps at all, right? But they may be they might be challenging themselves very much when it comes to activity. So that's where I have the first issue is, where the heck why do we need to take 10,000 steps if I'm exercising already, doing other things? And I think it's also important, and I always get people to evaluate if they are interested in having that watch, which I think can be a great tool, especially for people who have a very stationary job. So if you do have that watch on you, I think the first step, just like we have to do 3-day food log, I love to get people to look at an average. So what are we on average doing right now? And for some people, it might be 2,000 a day, 3,000 a day. For me to all of a sudden give you a goal of 10,000 just because it's some random number that someone decided to say that that's enough, is a really huge jump. So if you do want to use that step goal, we would start with your average and we would kick it up just a little notch. And then we would find what feels good for you, right? Maybe 8,000-ish is a good goal for you, because that's where you feel your best. You feel energized. You don't feel like you're fatigued at the end of the day. For some people, I have a nurse who's 20-some thousand because she's so busy, but that's 10,000 is just an easy number for her. So that number is very subjective, and it's very individualized to each person. And if you do want to use it, then we can find a number that's appropriate for you. But by all means, it's just a matter of getting moving. And that's why at Breaking 90, we always push that 20 minutes of purposeful movement, right? Just some type of movement every day that you're devoting time to. That's not necessarily have to be steps. It can be any type. Love
it. So number 3, we talk a lot about, so thrilled to be wrong about this. My belief was that the scale only measures progress.
Scale only measures progress. I like that. So it actually tells a really interesting story if we use it in that sense. But a lot of people, like you probably did previously, is if you stepped on the scale, if you didn't see what you were hoping to see, whether it be if your goal was fat loss and you didn't see it go down, well, then you're not progressing. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. And I mean, I loved being introduced to the concept of spikes and whooshes too, which I'm sure you'll talk about. But like I When you see a number you want to see, you're like, I'm doing so great. This is so wonderful. You feel empowered. And then the very next day, you have your carbs and you see the number go up and you're like, I'm doing terrible. I'm doing everything wrong. And you internalize a lot of it, right? And when I didn't know that the scale measures all kinds of other things, I really just thought it was my fault or my win.
That's awesome. Yeah. So as an online coach, right, we always get our clients to use a scale just because it gives us a bit more of a story when it comes to helping everyone out from afar. Now, when you're stepping on that scale, like Kelly mentioned, and you have a spike, which is what we call like a higher day on the scale, to you or to someone stepping on the scale, it's a fault. What did I do wrong? When you start thinking about everything you did that day, and maybe it was a day you had more carbs, so then that's where it becomes creating that carbs are the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Where if you stepped on your scale and it was a low day, you start thinking about everything you did, and maybe you had carbs that day and you're like, now I love carbs, right? So it's
Yeah.
but in reality, the spikes and the whooshes and the scale teaches us a lot about water retention. And I think that's a really big thing that people don't understand is that we go up and down all week, right? Depend on how much salt we had, how our sleep was, our stress levels, things we ate. And I can go on and on about that list for what causes sodium retention. But when we retain sodium, right, we retain water and the scale goes up and we think that we're not progressing. We like to look at the week as a whole, right? We look at it as an average. So that scale is not necessarily measuring just your progress, but it's just giving your coaches a better picture, a better story. That's
Mhm.
really all that we ask. We measure progress with pictures, like we talked about. We talked about them all earlier, but pictures are much better, and measurements are a much better way if you are trying to track progress in terms of fat loss. That's what I would highly suggest. The scale is just helping us understand what spikes and whooshes are for you as a specific client.
I love that you worded it in the way that the scale tells an interesting story. Because when you're taught that, the scale shows you the number and the number is always true, that's so not healthy, right? And when I was educated about what actually a full pound of fat is, and then I could actually go, well, I didn't eat that, therefore, then I could put pieces of the story together. And so when I step on the scale in the morning to just give that kind of number so that we have an average at the end of the week, I feel like I become more of a problem solver at that point. It makes me more reflective to know what I've done the previous day, what I've done throughout the week. Even things like, okay, yeah, I'm really stressed out. This makes sense. Okay, yeah, I had a shit sleep last night. This makes sense, right? Like I feel like a problem solver when I see the number, not to excuse it, but to, again, learn from it.
Absolutely. I think it's important that we teach each client the reasons why you might see a spike so that and I'm not saying it's going to make you feel at first it's still something
Mhm.
it takes time to get over, but understanding, like you said, you become more empowered with your body and understanding, okay, so I had a high sodium meal last night before I went to bed. Lying there, okay, I'm just going to expect a spike. It's not going to stress me out. On the day goes on and I drink my water, get back to my routine, and it will come back down. And having our clients feel more comfortable with that makes the journey a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah, I'm a really big fan of like, I use kind of like taglines, I guess. So when you learn something, you have this like good to know moment or this moment where you can say that makes sense, right? When you can connect dots and make sense of your world, it feels a lot better than looking at a number and going, well, what did I do wrong? Right. And feeling confused and out of control. That makes sense moment feels so much better because I know what the next right step is.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's a
Okay. So
great
we're
one.
getting into the top ones here. Um, the last two are really similar, but I do want to break them apart. And both of them have to do with shame. And this is why I put them at the top two, because I, again, was so thrilled to be wrong about this. The whole concept of quote unquote, you're going to love it, right? People who love their routines and love the new lifestyle or love the new body and condition that they're in will sometimes say like, oh, you're going to love it. And that line stuck with me. And in the moments where I didn't love what I was doing, where I didn't love what I quote unquote had to do that day for health and fitness, I got upset with myself about how I was feeling about what I had to do. Talk about a meta analysis, right? So I thought that if I committed to this new routine, that I should just absolutely love every piece of it, and that if I didn't, something was wrong with me again. So it was really nice to discover that you're not going to love every moment. Like I absolutely love volleyball. There are still some days where I'm like, "Ugh, 8 o'clock tonight, really?" And so there are still these moments where you're going to have those ideas or thoughts. It's not always going to be 100% motivation or 100% desire.
Absolutely. I think that comes down to one of our core principles of motivation and discipline,
Mhm.
right? So when it comes to health and fitness, when we are in moments of high motivation, which is typically when you start, right? You're motivated, you're willing to do whatever, the food log, and you're excited. And then a few weeks in, usually we lose that motivation. But the idea is that in hopes that we've created these moments of discipline. So
Mhm.
because we in a routine, you even if you use volleyball, right? Like usually you're motivated and you're excited and you go every time. But then the days that you're not as motivated, not as excited, it's part of your routine and it's become habit that you still need to show up and you know how you're going to feel when you're done, right? And that's that discipline is showing up regardless of the motivation, so that at the end you still get that feeling that you know you'll get, which is typically that enjoyment or that
Mhm.
happiness. Or and sometimes you might not even be that happy, I guess, after the fact. But like you said, it's keeping those the big goal in the back of your mind and expecting that, and it will turn into something great.
Mhm. Awesome. So number one is another kind of like quote unquote. So many times in, I'll say clickbait, but also the way people speak, you hear, oh, it's as easy as, and then, they fill in the blank with the concept of what you should do for your own health and fitness. And like
Mm,
this idea of what a regular formula should be for everyone to get fit and healthy. And I remember thinking, like, as early as a teenager, when I started becoming self-conscious, well, health and fitness should be as easy as, eating right or eating this way or exercising this way. And discovering with you guys, even in, our group alone, that not all of us are going about it the exact same way with our points or our exercise or our intensity. It was so wonderful to be wrong, that it's as easy as this one thing.
it's absolutely not a one size fits all approach, and that's probably one of our biggest things that we push. Right, every person gets that. We get our one-on-ones so that we can understand that you might need to work on water, whereas someone has to work on sleep, right? We find all these different information points about everyone, and then we create that into your plan.
Mhm.
And when it comes to, like you said, points, right, where we measure points with our hand. Well, even that's not one size fits all, because my hand is not the same size as your hand. So, taking into account all these different factors and getting to know your client and what works, what doesn't work, what they need to work on, that's the bottom line. Is you're right. It's not a one size fits all approach. And I think that's what makes it so enjoyable, is because things can be tailored to what you like.
Yeah, and it's not even one size fits all, for you for the rest of your life. I know
That's
my mom tells me this all the time. Like I'm guilty of saying, oh, well, it's as easy as doing this on a daily basis. And she's like, not when you turn 40, not when you have menopause, not after
Yep.
you've had children. And it's just like, wow, those are such good things to keep in mind. It's not as easy as this one formula.
Exactly. I think so often we see, a random post online, like you said, and it'll be like, do this workout and
Yeah.
drink this much water. It'd be
You'll
like
be
three times
set.
your body weight, milliliters. It's like, here's this equation, follow
Mhm.
it. It's like, well, you don't understand that. Yeah, exactly. I might sweat more than you, or I might sleep less than you. And all those things go into place and it's a factor when it comes to these equations that they place. So I'm really glad that that was your number one topic, because it's so
Cool.
important that everyone takes so many factors into account when it comes to their plans.
Yeah, and I hope too, by putting that one as number one, that people can walk away from this thinking like, okay, so as things shift for me again, can I be curious about what those next steps for myself are, instead of thinking I've done something wrong, internalizing that it's no longer working, therefore it must be my fault? Can we stay curious and open to possibilities?
I'm going to just branch on that a little bit. Like you
Please.
said, I just thought about like something that if I was a client or if I was someone who, let's say I just had a baby, right? Pre-pregnancy, I followed this plan and it worked. It was perfect. I felt great, energized, I lost a bunch of weight. Now, post-pregnancy, I'm going to go follow that same plan because I know it worked for me. When in
Hmm.
reality, it's not probably going to work because you are now a different person. And now we need to create a new plan for the changes in your life and
Hmm.
the different person that you are. So, like you mentioned, it's not just a one size fits all for everyone, but even you change and you need different plans as time goes on. That's a really great
Yeah.
point.
Awesome. Oh, this was so much fun.
Awesome. I'm so glad you brought that up. That was cool. Are you
Thank
going to leave
you.
us with some type of tip today?
Yes. So one of the things I debated doing by sliding in another one to make it a list of 10 was to talk about sleep. But I thought maybe I'll leave this for the kitchen tip. I thought it would be really great to leave people with one simple yoga posture that is sleep inducing, that they can do anywhere between 30 seconds to 2 minutes before bedtime to just get into that relaxation place. So in Sanskrit, the proper terminology is Viparita Karani, which means legs up the wall. So you can lay down on your back with your butt against a wall, and you're going to put your legs up the wall. They don't have to be straight. They don't have to be where the muscles are engaged. You can bend the knees just softly. And it just lets the blood rush back down and recirculate. You can take a few deep breaths there. And like they say, it just induces relaxation for you. It's a good bedtime routine.
I use it often, and I'm glad you mentioned this. It can actually be used for help alleviating tension in the back, right?
Mhm.
Stretching the posterior chain. Great for digestion, great for recovery and letting the lymphatic system take over.
Mhm.
This is one of my favorites, and I get a lot of my workout members to actually do this at the end of their workouts, even
Well,
just to take that pressure off their feet and legs.
yeah.
Awesome.
And then disclaimer, I guess, for any woman who is on their menstrual cycle is just to consult with your practitioners to make sure you're doing it in a healthy way, and that it's not something that's going to be counteractive to your health at that point in the month.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks for
Jerrika, this
joining,
was
Kelly.
so fun. Thank you. I hope Alex is busy more often.
Yeah, yeah, we'll just have to tell them that we'll just start doing this on our own on the
Yeah.
side. Sorry, Alex.
You're out.
Yeah, no, we love having him. Thanks for joining, Kelly.
Yeah.
We'll talk soon.
Take care.